welcome to Season 6, Episode 22 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
We are, of course, reading James Hitchcock's History of the Catholic Church from the Apostolic Age to the Third Millennium, and this will be our last episode covering this book, our last episode in Season 6, as we finish up the second part of the last chapter, Joy and Hope, Grief and Anguish, really talking about the Council of Vatican II and its aftermath. Now here, really kind of getting into the aftermath. We talked about all the theological stuff in the last episode, so you can feel free to rewatch that one or re-listen, I suppose.
Rewatch it.
Rewatch it, yeah. Pull up the sound waves on your TV or something. There you go. But yeah, no, I thought this was a great chapter, a great way to end. We were just mentioning before we started recording, this probably had the most interesting information for us out of any chapter in the book.
I agree. And I don't know if you noticed, the Vatican has issued some new, structured guidance with regard to some sort of prayer over...
blessings.
Blessings of sorts. Of homosexual couples.
Yeah, I saw that, and I don't think it's as big of a deal as everyone's making it out to be, because it's really been like church teaching, like, yeah, you can bless anyone, like, if they're in a state of sin, and I think that's what, because I read the actual statement, the statement recognizes that, like, well, yeah, same-sex unions are a state of sin, and this should not be confused by any means with blessing the marriage. You should have no, like, adornments, reflecting, the sacrament of marriage or anything like that.
Yes.
But all of, like, the news headlines are like, oh, the Vatican blesses same-sex unions, and there's that, I don't know if you saw the Gay Jesuit, James Martin, Reverend James Martin, I think is his official title, but he said out a bunch of tweets.
He's like a superhero, or a supervillain. Gay Jesuit.
Is that his name?
He's got like a big G-J on
Gay
his shirt.
Jesuit.
And he's got a cape.
Yeah, I don't know if he's
rainbow cape.
I don't know if he's actually gay, but he's like supposed to be the guy who's in charge of LGBT stuff or whatever. But he put out a whole bunch of tweets. Oh, this is such a big shift in church teaching. We're welcoming LGBT people into the church, and it's like, oh, what?
Do you think there's any chance he's not gay? I mean, I don't know the guy.
I don't know.
I don't know that he's ever said he's gay.
Yeah,
but he really, really cares about gay stuff.
Yeah, which makes me think that he's gay.
It seems to me that people that really, really care about that stuff are gay.
Yes, he's also a Jesuit, so that's a point. The gay factor. Yeah.
Well, this modern discussion of the Jesuits really ratifies my contempt for the Jesuits.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. It's good to have a basis of fact for your contempt of people.
Yeah, because
otherwise it's just contempt.
It's more aspirational.
No, it's real. I guess I should also mention we're in person now, and we'll be for the next couple episodes. We won't have an episode next week, of course, because that'll be our mid-season break, and it's Christmas. Yes. But we'll be back then in 2024, I guess, will be our next episode.
We should have like an annual Christmas special where I just go on angry rants for Christmas.
The Festivus spirit.
Yeah. Well, that's what. It's coming up.
That's tomorrow.
23rd.
No. Yes.
Isn't the
22nd, 23rd? Not tomorrow. Yeah, okay.
Is the 23rd a prime number? 23.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it's 23rd.
All right. Do you want to talk about the chapter?
Yes, I do. So I think your description of it being the aftermath of Vatican II is very descriptive, a good term to use. So there's it really starts with this crisis of faith, and I was going to segue into this chapter because I think you're right about whatever this guidance was that was released today, and I didn't read the actual text. I read Catholic sources that interpreted it just because I didn't feel like it, but today about this new blessing thing. And your point, I think, is well taken, is that it doesn't change anything. So then what's the point of it?
That's what I was kind of thinking, too. That's the counterpoint.
The same thing that happened in the Vatican II is that they act like this is all already established, but then why are we even talking about it?
And that's the problem I see with the Vatican saying this, because now it makes it much easier for people like James Martin or the more liberal Catholics to say, oh, well, look at this. This is such a step forward. Even if it's really not, it's much easier to push your agenda if you have something like this that you can use.
And you can see the church is just going towards a schism.
I think so.
Oh, yeah, for sure on that issue. Yeah. Because the Europeans and these Jesuit leftists will not accept anything short of capitulation to the modern culture on all issues. Abortion, birth control.
If only that was a heresy that was condemned by a pope. Yeah. If only modernism.
And I mean, Pius X, inspirational character. So, and what do they have? Say Pius X.
Societies. And that's one of the ones that's under fire from Francis, because they're one of the big Latin Mass people that's been targeted. They were the ones who had who were approached by the FBI for the informants as people in the St. Pius X.
Well, if the FBI is investigating, you're doing something right. And as an aside, I'll say this. This is we're putting this on the record, so to speak.
Oh boy.
I've never had anything but contempt for the FBI. They don't know how to do their jobs. They think their job is something different than what their job is. But as far as criminal investigations, they're terrible. They've had scandal after scandal after scandal in their agency, from everywhere from the famed FBI crime lab, where they wrongfully convicted people all across the country on fake evidence, literally.
Yeah. Well, we just lost our FBI listeners.
We've
doubled our FBI. You can see so many more downloads on this episode.
Our accounts are going to go through the roof. Anyway, let's get started.
Yes.
So the first section, I think you might have mentioned, crisis of faith. And so there's a really good discussion. I don't really know how to approach it, but this aggiornamento, and how they really they try to appeal to the council's spirit. Like this Vatican had this spirit. Well, it's not really what it said; it's what they meant. Well, or they felt like they meant. Yeah. And the irony of it is that the authority of the council was itself relativized. Basically, it's relative to who is looking at it, because that they aren't. They're saying that essentially the actual teaching transcended the actual decrees. Yeah, and so in some cases they might even contradict them, like the spirit of it would, and so that ends up calling into question what any of it means and whether it's even accurate guidance. And this whole relativism thing is throughout. The left wing always loved relativism. You know why? Because it makes them God. But anyway, so that's a whole other rant.
Well, it reminds me a lot of.
I want to have a short episode, but I'm in a rant mood.
I can tell. Yes. But it reminds me a lot of what we were talking about with Austin Freeman about all the modern literary criticism of it. Doesn't really matter what the author said; it's what you can pull out of it. Yes. That's the same thing I think we're seeing here. And aggiornamento is just these people. If you don't listen to last episode, aggiornamento is an Italian word that means updating. So that the ones who want to make sure it's approachable to a modern audience and really just modernize everything.
Yeah, they really have my contempt for this. This is a quote on the 495, where the author says, that the theologian, basically there's a second magisterium that's parallel to the hierarchy and ultimately having more authority than the hierarchy of the church. Not paraphrasing. On grounds that theologians alone fully understood the faith.
So it's all these intellectual types.
Arrogant. Yeah. Gosh, golly, and if you're one of those people who's like, well, these people disagree with me because they just don't understand. There's a really good chance you just are wrong. Yeah,
well, it's what a lot of people have said about the Midwest for decades now. It's the flyover country. It's the deplorables, whatever.
True that they say that. So the author says that in many ways the ultimate source of this crisis lay in the biblical studies, which were encouraged at times. But and you say, well, how can it be bad that you have biblical studies? Well, they tried to make it so that the Bible and the Scripture were just something of the times, and so now we have different times, and humanity is changing. Yeah. And I reject that completely. And that was kind of a new concept to me. Several years ago. And who really pushed it was Victor Davis Hanson, who's a great writer, and he's a classicist and historian. And his position is generally humankind is immutable. You have certain things as a society and as humans, they just haven't changed. Technology has changed, our tools have changed, but we're still the same type of people that lived 3,000 years ago. And of course the biblical studies are saying, well, they're different then. And so what they're saying, they didn't really understand. Yeah. And so now we're updating our knowledge, and our spirituality is deeper because we know more things, whatever. But that's part of the problem.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the funniest things to me is those people who say that and like, oh, we're so much smarter. I don't know where I saw this somewhere on Instagram, but it's somebody replying to one of those people, and it's like, so if you went back in time to the medieval times, how would you explain Wi-Fi to a medieval peasant? It's like, well, we have no idea how any of it works. We have better technology, but we're not inherently smarter. We're not inherently, and we have access to more knowledge, maybe if we have even the desire to look it up, but we are not inherently better than these people who lived before.
I'm pretty sure I'd have a hard time explaining a toaster. How does that toaster work? And in fact, I had a cheap toaster, and the little thing broke so it wouldn't stay down.
Yeah.
And I could probably have fixed it. I just threw it away. I got a new one.
Well, it's like, because it's the electricity generates heat, and that's in the cold. Okay, well, what's electricity?
Yeah, well, how does it generate heat for crying out loud? How does the electricity, which you can't see or smell, is somehow making these coils hot?
Yeah, and there are people out there. There are people out there who know that now. Of course, I'm not saying that's just
I knew that
knowledge.
One time in my youth. I don't know that I could explain it now. I've forgotten so much of what I used to know, but I feel like I'm more wise now.
That's great, Dad.
I have a better understanding of the world and less knowledge.
Sure.
Well, you're too young. You'll know when you hit 50, you'll know what I mean.
All right.
And you'll be like, huh. I remember somebody said that to me once. I can't remember who. And you'll think you're brilliant for thinking that.
There you go.
And you won't have to attribute it to me because you won't remember, unlike the president of Harvard who copy and paste. So, all right, what we want to try. So we're talking about these kind of liberal thinkers and this biblical studies, and they actually were saying, as a result of the Council, Catholics were encouraged to study the Bible as never before. But according to the author, ironically, they were also often told that it was not an altogether reliable guide to knowledge of Jesus. Like you can't get that from the Scripture, and so these contradictory terms are really undercutting everything. So there's a historical, critical method of studying the Bible, and basically, there's this new way of doing it to understand the Bible solely as a collection of documents about the Jews. That's, you're using this historical, critical method, and it became increasingly difficult to draw lines, as to where's the belief in Jesus' resurrection? Is that essential to the faith? I mean, is that important, or is that just story? These
is it just symbolism?
Said, symbolism from the Old Testament. They're just kind of creating things, and and I have not read the Gnostic Gospels. You ever read any of those? No. The Thomas, Philip, Judas, and other so-called Gospels, but they were not adopted by the Catholic Church, and I don't think by any other Christian faith.
They were.
Is there anybody else that says they're?
I mean, they were used by some early Christians because it was sort of their own creations, but they were written. I mean, archaeological stuff shows they were written much later than the other Gospels, and they have just contradictory theology. Right. But I mean, it was spread by some of the early Christians. I think Thomas was the one that was spread the most, but of course wasn't adopted officially by any religion as we think of it now.
Well, I doubt that the Book of Thomas is reliable.
You tended to doubt things.
Unless I see it with my own eyes. And I can touch it with my hands.
There you go.
Bible humor there. Hey-o. So that this kind of it ends up kind of challenging the dogmas of the church, especially with the early practices, because some of that stuff's not in the Bible itself, but. There's a kind of a long discussion of the theology of
aggiornamento.
Aggiornamento.
There you
sounds
go.
Like a nice cheese.
Well, it's Italian.
I'd like to have a slice of that aggiornamento.
That's great, Dad.
Very dry cheese. Aggiornamento.
I think you're thinking of Parmesan.
I think if I ever sold any sort of cheese, I would just call it aggiornamento.
There you go. Maybe then you'll remember how to pronounce the word.
I will not. All right. So, so this theology of these people that subscribe to this argument, both at Vatican and following, talk about this Christology from below, as the book talks about it, that they focus on the experience of Jesus, who Jesus is for me, and the personal Jesus, not Depeche Mode. But you never heard the song Depeche Mode, Personal Jesus?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, the people that were my age will know that one. Okay. You should have just let it slide.
I'm sorry.
You got me off my mojo.
I apologize.
And it ends up being like a new kind of Arianism, which we talked about in several chapters ago.
Yeah.
And then there's this, I don't know, have you ever heard this idea of the anonymous Christian? a theory, this Rahner, R-A-H-N-E-R.
I mean, I've heard of it a little bit. The idea that, embracing gospel values without realizing it,
Right.
which is
kind of like the
to somebody who's never heard of Jesus argument. But I think he's applying it more so to anybody. Even if you have heard of Jesus and you're still being like a good person,
Right.
even if you're rejecting the faith, you can still go to heaven. That was sort of Rahner's idea.
And I don't think Jesus subscribed to that.
No.
Because he says,
I am the way, the truth, and the life.
You only get there through me.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think the struggle with people who never had any knowledge or information about Jesus. Well, how do you condemn them?
Yeah.
So there's a logical argument about that.
But if you're living your life, and especially in a Christian society where you can see Christianity everywhere, and you're just explicitly ignoring it,
Yes.
even if I think those people could still be good people, but I don't think that they can go to heaven.
I don't know that I subscribe to the idea that they're necessarily going to hell. Or
I think it's possible for them to go to heaven,
but I think maybe that guy at the corner of the intersection screaming about repent sinner, you're all going to hell, and only Jesus saves you. Maybe you should pay attention to that, or maybe not. I don't know. At least he's not begging for money.
You are in a rant mood.
By the way, have you ever given to any of those people on the side of the street?
I don't think so.
Good. That's a good Christian thing to do. They make more money than I do. They got like 401ks going now. They got health plans with benefits.
Oh, Roth IRAs.
I'm sure they do, actually. It's all cash. Anyway, so there's Teilhard. Have you ever heard of that guy?
No, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. I've never heard of this guy.
Jesuit paleontologist. He was a very influential figure of aggiornamento. And he had a cosmic theology derived not only from human history, but from the evolution of the entire universe. And he was forbidden from publishing his books, but after he died, his books began to appear and became, for a while, very influential. But it was almost like a pantheistic divination, well, it's like the world spirit. And
yeah, it
Gaia
seems kind of like
kinda
Hegelian is what I was about to say. Is the spirit of history and stuff like that. We're all moving towards something better. Is what it kind of seems like to me.
I think my biggest crisis, potential crisis in the future, is if one of my sons brought some girl home and she started talking about they were dating seriously. She started talking about Gaia. I don't know what I'm going to do with that.
I don't know what you would do, but I would love to be there when it happens.
No, you wouldn't, because I do have a rule about that. I will bite my tongue with regard to any of the boys bringing home a girl, because the last thing on earth I want to do is alienate a future daughter-in-law. I mean, it's because anybody, even if Eli came home with a girl he was dating and whatever, I mean, but what if he ends up marrying that girl and she hates me?
That'd be unfortunate.
Yeah, I want her to develop the hatred slowly over time.
Yes. Well, as of right now, I think I'm the only one of us who's dating anyone, and so I don't think you have to worry about it.
Sam, but you never know.
That's true. That's true.
I wouldn't talk about it on this podcast, although I just did.
Yes.
But yes. Well, I approve of the one you're dating for now.
She'll listen to this and she'll hear that.
Which I think I find endearing and also odd.
That she listens?
Yes.
Yeah.
Doesn't she have anything better to do with time? I mean,
well, she pointed that out 2 episodes ago when you started off the podcast with an angry rant yelling at anyone who's ever listened to this.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was good. All right. It's going to take 3 hours to get through this.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right, morality. So these aggiornamento people, of course.
Aggiornamento.
Do you think they were really strident about following specific teachings about sexuality and marriage and all that? No. Because why would they? Because, modern world, we understand these things better. And of course, and they say the old, as an author says, the old casuit, basically a causation system of rules and laws provided people with concrete direction. They try to undercut all that. It's like it's all relative, all this relativism, and I think that is really the most horrific moral philosophy to have. Any sort of moral relativism. There are absolutes, man. Anyway,
I agree,
as you should. And then they also had what's another horrible philosophy of morality or
self-fulfillment.
Self-fulfillment is so. I have to be fulfilled myself. No, you don't. Actually, no, you don't. It's not all about you.
Yeah.
And maybe I view God as a somewhat angry God.
Oh, I know.
Disappointed in us.
Yeah.
Because, he should be disappointed in us, for crying out loud. We should do much better. And it's not just about me feeling better, it's about me doing better. Anyway, they thought it was.
Yes.
Don't you think?
Yes. No, I agree.
And then, of course, they talk about the worst things. So if I hear anything about Gaia, bad. If I think anything about lived experience, which is another quote from the next thing about, that the American priest theologian Charles Curran began to cite people's lived experiences to justify behavior, primarily sexual, of course.
Yeah, it's like, if they've lived this way for so long, then surely they just believe it's right, and we can't fault them for believing it's right. Of course you can.
Yes.
We have, the Bible in the church, and there's pretty strict rules on what is right and what's wrong that you can just find out there.
Right.
Yes.
They exist, but they're inconvenient because, I really want to screw everybody that will spread their legs for me. But I want to. Isn't it about my self-fulfillment? God would want me to experience pleasure. Or else why would there be pleasure?
It's true.
So there's a whole section in the next paragraph on actual moral relativism, which is, of course, it ends up being the ends justifies the means. So you say, well, what I'm doing is wrong, but I have a good purpose. I have a good purpose in doing these things. No. You should care about the ends, but also the means. It's not one or the other. It's
like, well, I'm not doing this because I want to sin. I'm doing this because I want to be happy. It's that idea. I'm not doing it out of bad intentions. It's all relative.
I don't think there's very many sins where you do because you don't want to sin. Like you don't want to do the thing that's a sin.
What do you mean?
Like every sin is something you want to do for some reason.
Well, sure. Yeah.
But so just saying, well, it's going to make me feel better. It's like it's just literally the path to hell, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
All the sins, they talk about the 7 deadly sins, like gluttony. I want to eat that. It's one of my sins. But because it makes me feel better. Well, that's not. Even an issue.
Well, because that's what they say is the deadliest sin of all is pride, is thinking that you are the center of everything. That's what really all the other sins lead from, is just your pride in yourself. Yeah.
Yes.
No, I agree.
Yes. So you should remember, you have nothing to be proud about. And then, of course, contraception, that came in to practice right after Vatican II. And so I think a lot of these philosophies were going to be destructive anyway, even without Vatican II, but I think it kind of let loose this whole philosophy and this kind of laissez-faire attitude about moral teaching, which is difficult. And then and ironically, when the Pope said, no, we're taking that issue of contraception out of this thing, we're going to have a different commission study it. I think the author makes a great point. Well, that undercuts the church's authority because that means it's open to debate, or implies it's open to debate, instead of just saying no, you're not going to do it, or whatever you're going to do, make the decision.
It's what we were saying with the homosexual civil unions and stuff. It's like, why bother talking about it if we know the ruling on it, we know that it's not going to be recognized. Why open the can of worms?
Yeah, and then just so we're clear, I don't have any problem with people praying, priests praying over people and blessing them and trying to lead them to the right path and all that stuff. But you don't need to have guidance on it other than to say, hey, man, all that stuff's private. You don't need it. You shouldn't, because that's what's going to happen. Is these left-wing priests and bishops are going to be out there and they're going to be holding essentially a marriage ceremony, even though it's specifically said in that document that you're not supposed to do that. That's what they're saying. That's not a marriage ceremony. Well,
we
didn't do the liturgy. We're just in the church, and this one, I'm just saying this one because you never know which one they're going to be. But this one's wearing a white gown, the other one's wearing a black tuxedo.
Yeah.
And whatever variations of those two people there are.
And that's kind of what I think the James Martin dude was saying at the end of his section of tweets. He's like, I know many other Catholic priests are excited to go out and bless our homosexual friends.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, why are you excited about that. If they haven't come to you asking for it, it's like, whatever.
And why does he have so many homosexual friends?
I mean, it's in his superhero name.
I know.
He's the Gay Jesuit.
Gay Jesuit. I'm gonna round up all my gay friends and bless them. But I mean, really, do you? If whatever. I don't know. We're going on that path. That's a whole different thing. All right. So there's a discussion of. Oh yeah, and I do want to mention. So what happens during this period of time, where there's all sorts of undercutting of the sexual morality and the standards that were known prior to Vatican II. What does it result in? Divorce rates rose to the level of the general population, and those, of course, exploded. Yeah. And annulments, as the author says, increased geometrically. Yeah. So they're approving these like candy, so it really just undercut the foundation of the church. And so the next section he has is education. That the Thomistic scholastic thought, that intellectual thought completely collapsed.
Yeah. And
seminaries were corrupted. And the dissenting opinions, which were dissenting from the official Catholic Church, were getting, if not the same, or maybe more authority than the official Catholic thought. And the stupid Pope is up there. Is it Paul VI that we're talking about in this era?
Oh, at this point, I don't think it's Paul VI anymore. I think it's a different guy, immediately following. But I could be wrong. I know Paul VI was Pope for most of the council and then a couple years thereafter. So I don't know exactly what time frame. So
I think I'm right about that. Okay, yeah. What's he doing? He's sitting on his hands.
Yeah.
Start excommunicating some people. That's the whole point of it.
Yeah. Especially if it's your Catholic education. If your Catholic education is spouting things that just are not Catholic, then what are you doing?
Well, of course, there's a cardinal that's out in California that was involved in the sex scandals, and of course, he's still getting a salary.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, there's a big biography on their website how great he was. Holy Jews. All right. So, basically, we're talking about humanitarianism, and just kind of minimizing distinctive Catholic beliefs within the educational system and within the actual teaching of people, coming into the church. Yeah. What being a Catholic is, and it's like, well, we need to water it down to encourage people to come here, but people, the fact of the matter is, people don't water down anything. Yeah. That's part of the strength of Islam. It's like they're like, we got to kill the infidels. Yeah. All right. We should believe in something. Really, it's like, we're going to fight for this belief. Yeah. What do we do? Oh, it's all relative. And, we all want to get along.
You just need to be a good person.
And God's a God for everybody. Okay, well, that's true. But maybe he's a little vengeful about, raping children. Like Muhammad.
Just lost our Muslim listener.
Yeah, well, I think we lost him a while back. Isn't Muhammad the one that had like a 7-year-old bride?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that wasn't far off.
Yes. No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, I know I'm right. Thank you for. But you shouldn't say I'm right about that, because you're gonna get what do you say?
Beheaded.
No, canceled.
Oh, same thing.
It'll be on the record. It's one thing to allow your father to rant on a podcast. It's another thing to ever agree with it. So watch your step.
I apologize.
We all know what you meant was I was right that he had a 7-year-old bride.
Yes.
That was the extent of what I was right about, according to you.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. You did not call the Prophet Muhammad, blessed be his name.
Don't say that. I think you're supposed to say praise be upon him.
Oh, praise be upon him.
That's why I was calling you up for that. This is because you just said the wrong word. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I know you want to be respectful to
I'm not going to finish that thought.
That's good. That's probably for the best.
I can see the fear washing over your face. Oh my God, what is he going to say? It's going to be bad, but I want to see it. No. All right. So, and of course, the demise of Latin Mass.
Yes.
And the funny that the author points out, most Catholics were unaware that the Latin liturgy of any kind was still permitted after Vatican II. It was, but now it's not. Because it come full circle. No more Latin for you. Because I don't know why. Whatever. Yeah. That's a whole different thing. So, then the dramatic changes, like on the with the altar. You talked about this a lot, as far as like the where they faces the priest would face the altar with the congregation before, and now he's facing us, which I think you were the first one really to mention that to me.
Yeah, because it used to be the case that the altar wasn't pulled out at all. It was up against the wall, and that's what you see in a lot of the older churches. Is you have the very ornamental backing, up there, but they've just moved the altar out from the back of the wall. So it's just a very detailed,
or like a stronger table out in front of it. So you have this beautiful ornate altar with the tabernacle. Yeah. And candles.
Well, sometimes, I think that's another thing he talks about in here, but a lot of churches moved the tabernacle, off to the side, which you really, I don't think you're supposed to be. That should be the dead center, but I know it's
that's where it used to be at Our Lady's.
Yeah.
Remember, it was off to the left side. The side. And then, was it Father Mawson that moved it?
I think it was Father Mawson who put it back in the center.
Because, oddly enough, Father Kerber, who's an old school guy, he's passed now, but he had it off to the side, which, and then, Father Mawson put him at center of attention, so to speak.
Yes.
Where it's been ever since. So, those kind of, that must have been really, I don't know, I say disturbing, but
jarring. That's what I was thinking.
That's a good point. It's just jarring. Oh my gosh, why is all of a sudden he's turned around, he's talking in English, we got a whole new liturgy. Before you know it, they'll be waving pride flags out front. Wait, they didn't think that because they thought that would never happen.
Yes.
They didn't know what pride was.
Except that it was a sin.
Well, yeah, that's true. Well, we can go down that path.
Yes.
Maybe we should the next chapter, the next podcast should be about gays.
Oh boy, that'd be a good one.
Well, it could be something about the sexualization of everything. Everything's about sex. You notice that everything is about sex. You want to do that? Sex. I don't like it. I don't think it's sex. Jesus, I don't even want to know what you're doing. You know what? Do whatever you're doing. I don't care. I don't want to know.
I very
rarely hold my wife's hand in public. For Christ's sake. Why do they have parades of half-naked people and feathers and stuff?
Because they're our great American cultural heritage, Dad. We have to show them off to the world.
Yes. Okay. So, active participation is the next section. Yeah. So it's talking about, which I didn't know about, the discouragement of private masses. Where the congregation, which is normal for us, because we join in all the prayers, and it's not just the priest leading it or really doing it, and we're there participating in the mass. But that certainly was encouraged. But they discourage private masses, like like a priest. I always thought a priest could have mass by himself. Yeah. Why not? But they discouraged that, and a lot of the private masses were for the benefit of people had passed.
Because that's what he says. It's raised questions about the meaning of the mass itself. Traditionally, it was a communal act in the sense that it was celebrated for the benefit of people who were not physically present, especially for the dead. It's a sacrifice for all Catholics. Right. But now, if you have to be there, what's the point? Now it's just this weird participatory event that you have to go to every Sunday. And it loses some of its spiritual significance.
And then the funerals. I don't know if I've ever seen a requiem mass.
Yeah, I don't think I have either.
Full-blown requiem mass as opposed to the funeral liturgy and the homily ended up becoming very much like just a eulogy about the deceased.
Because I've been to a lot of Catholic funerals.
I've been to more.
Congratulations.
Go ahead.
But I guess we both have, because I was an altar server for so many years, and me and Jonah and Eli were one of the few reliable servers, I think. So we were called on, all the time, like over the summer and stuff.
Well, certainly for COVID.
Yeah.
You guys were the only ones that were serving for the whole parish.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really? Were we?
Yes.
Oh, I forgot about that.
You guys were doing every funeral.
Oh, that's right.
And then when it started opening up, and they were doing a little bit, they were doing weddings. You guys were the only ones that were willing to do it. We were the only parents that were letting their kids do it. Now, granted, there's a small segment of people that have kids that have been trained as altar boys, so that's a small portion.
That's true.
And then very few people, even among them, go to church on even regular Sunday masses. And then further removed, anybody that'd be willing to take their kids to a funeral mass for people. Yeah. And so it's
I did not realize
like a
that.
Huge drop off, but I don't know that there's any other kids that were doing it.
Yeah, I didn't realize we were the only ones. But I've been to a lot of Catholic funerals.
Yeah, the only objection I had was that they were making you guys wear masks. And I was, but that's a whole nother.
Yes.
But anyway, what are you saying? I interrupted you.
I was just saying that like the homilies usually do feel more like eulogies, which I mean is very nice, and usually they're very thoughtful and stuff. But I've never seen a mass where it was more of that requiem style, where it was more of an idea of pray for the soul of the dead. There's a possibility that they may not be in heaven.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, I've had that, but it was when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Again, as an altar boy, where the priest, but it's always almost a dual purpose. One is, and it's almost like a pray for all of us too. But it's, and I get it. Funeral masses. I think, as I've said before, I think priests have a really, really hard job, and I think especially the funerals and the last rites and that kind of stuff. That's got to be a drag at some point. And especially if you're doing a funeral mass for somebody that hasn't been in church in 20 years, we haven't bothered for, so it was a little late. I don't know. That's got to be discouraging.
Yeah.
And especially if you don't know the guy because he doesn't participate in anything, or the gal. And they have to come up with something. I mean, everybody's watching them, crying and all that stuff. And so I know there's a temptation to make people feel better. And you don't want to say, well, he might be in hell. We better pray for him. Real hard. Struggling hard because, as Nelly would say, it's getting hot in here.
That's great, Dad.
So you like that?
That was good.
All right. So, again, expounding on that, just talking about the modern style of liturgy to make it relevant to the people, which always result in the I like how he says you're like balloons and dancing and quote folk unquote music. And folk music doesn't exist. It's like a fake music. I wish I could quote some of the music.
Yeah, folk music. I do like the point he mentions there right after that, where he's saying, primary emphasis placed on the Eucharist as a community meal.
Yes.
Except for some people, the greeting of peace, which had not been part of the Tridentine Mass, became the high point of the celebration.
Yes.
That sort of active participation. Oh, no, this is the point where I can turn around and see my friends and talk to them for a minute. That became the high point, the point that people, look forward to, if anything, in the Mass, which is...
Can I say one good thing about COVID?
Yes.
Now it's not really common to shake people's hands. And I think that's great.
Yes.
I shake hands with the family, wave to everybody else. That's great.
Yeah.
It was always kind of awkward.
It was.
And there's like multiple people, so you kind of reach over and it's like you kind of bump hands.
Yes.
So that is like the only good thing about COVID. And it pretty much ended the people holding hands during Our Father.
Yes.
Which I don't know what that was. When did that even start? I don't like that.
Because it was a reflection. I know the thing was because like the priest, when he's saying
he's supposed to have
his hands out and then he raises them up. Yeah, and that's
we're not supposed to do that stuff.
Yes, I'm aware.
So I think that ended that.
Yes.
You can't hold hands. You with your own family. What do you think we're doing back home?
We're about to be on a COVID rant.
Anyway, religious life.
Yes.
You know what happened after Vatican II? It all just internally imploded. I mean, that's really the point of it. And of course, priestly and religious life, changing it from a vocation as if they're almost standing in the shoes of Jesus or serving as his representative. Now it's just they're just being of service to the community. Well, then why in the heck do they have to be celibate? Why do they have to all these requirements? Why is it so burdensome? And all you're doing is community service? For crying out loud, you can do that anywhere.
Yeah.
And so the vocations declined, and there's a decline of discipline. So all these, let me just read this. When here's a quote: religious discipline, which had been at a high level at the eve of the council, declined sharply as heterosexual relationships were not uncommon, and homosexuality among priests became to be a serious problem. And bishops showed a certain reluctance to deal with it, even when the Holy See ordered that known homosexuals not be admitted to seminaries, and several bishops were themselves implicated, and it just went downhill. And of course, perhaps the only thing worse than the Jesuits are feminist nuns.
Yeah, I read this passage. This is interesting.
This is so true. This whole section about the militant feminist nuns, they're horrible. And there were a group of them that would attend all of the death penalty trials in St. Louis County, of which there were a number of them.
Yeah.
And they were just ignorant, vile people. They weren't there to do any good. They were just ignorant, vile, feminist weirdos. If I had my druthers, I would have kicked them out of the church. Anyway, they thought they were like, good because they were really doing nothing.
Yes. Interesting.
But they felt better because we're trying to pray for these murderers. They would like accost family members, the victims' family members.
Yeah.
I'm praying for you even though you're wanting to kill someone. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's awful.
Yeah. Anyway. So I was going to say, the renewalists. Do you want to talk anything about that, or the democracy and this whole thing where you're trying? The renewalists for the communities of women. The communities of women for centuries ran schools and hospitals. Now abandoned those, and it caused major crisis in education and healthcare. I mean, there was a real big. Really an education, like a teacher shortfall, when they couldn't get anybody to become nuns because the school sisters in Notre Dame were huge.
Because I went to Catholic school, Catholic grade school, and high school. Only ever had one nun in both of those. We had Sister Pat at Our Ladies for some years, but she was an older woman. I think she ended up passing away, before I graduated. And those schools were built to house nuns, and there's nobody there. I mean, we had that whole second building at St. Pius, what's now the annex. That was
that's right.
That was a nunnery or a convent.
Yeah. Right.
And now there just doesn't exist anymore.
Yep. Well, because why go into that ministry if it doesn't mean anything?
And that's what he's saying. Is this idea of self-fulfillment as a necessary condition for psychological health was a novelty in religious life and rendered the very concept of obedience unacceptable. Yes. It's like, that's the whole point of going into a monastery, joining, a sisterhood, is this obedience to a higher power. But if everything's about, my self-fulfillment, why would I ever want to be obedient to somebody else?
Yes, and the whole idea of like a democratic leadership of these convents or monasteries, it just undercut the entire hierarchy and structure of it. And he quotes some statistics here: over 65% decline from 1965 to 2010. The number of sisters, of nuns in the United States, 65% during that period of time. And it's just a complete free fall.
Yeah, I liked his discussion on a noted failure. This story was wild. Yeah. I'll tell that here. He says the most celebrated renewal story was of the Immaculate Heart Sisters. Their program of aggiornamento was guided by the prestigious psychologist Carl Rogers, a one-time student for the Protestant ministry who had developed a negative attitude towards religion. That's a good start for your religious program. The renewal was a paradigm for many others that followed: favorable publicity, optimistic expectations, use of fashionable techniques of behavior modification, and a personified villain, which was a cardinal. Yes. It's like, we're fighting back against this bad evil dude who's trying to encourage us to not live our true lives. And he says the community fell apart. Many sisters left. Those who remained split into opposing factions, and there were a few new members. And in time, the community ceased to exist. And so it's like, once you open up this gate, it's just, what's the point?
Those left-wingers always end up in opposing factions.
That's true.
It's like the communists, and then we're the real communists. No, we're the real communists. There's a third group. Wait a second. Where do those guys come from? We're the neo-communists.
There you go.
The neo-new communists. Yeah, the fifth group comes out. We're the originalists, the original communists. You're all fakes. What? Over and over again. Never-ending factualization and vituperous. I don't know. I thought of a word.
I have no idea what word you were going for. The vituperous.
It completely went sideways within my mind.
That's great.
Or something. What happened to the monks, the male communities? They were less rebellious than females. And of course, there's a discussion of the Jesuits. And the leadership of the Society of Jesus announced that, quote, a, quote, fundamental option for the poor was the very reason for its existence, it points out. Prior to that, not been previously recognized, and they made it difficult to justify much of the Society's traditional educational and pastoral work.
Yeah.
Let's see. No, you're really not for that.
Yeah, because that was their whole thing. That's what we've been reading about this whole book. They were like a special group specifically under the Pope designed to spread the faith and be like guards of doctrine.
Yes.
Against heresy. And then it's like, well, no, our big thing is caring for the poor.
Yeah. No, that's not.
No, we have this Society of St. Vincent de Paul. They're pretty good at that. We don't need you to do that too.
Yeah.
Sure, you could do it if you want to, but that's not your main goal. Yeah. Anybody can do that.
Yes, maybe a Dominican can do that. that? I don't know. A Franciscan? But a Jesuit?
Yeah.
You're like supposed to be a college professor, you knucklehead. You're not out there serving meals to the poor.
Yeah.
Stay in your lane. But they wanted to feel better about them. Well,
Yes.
No, we don't want to be the defenders of the faith and intellectual leaders of the church.
Because that denies other people's self-fulfillment.
We want to be popular among the pride people. Gay Jesuit.
that should go on our T-shirt for these past 2 seasons. The Gay Jesuit.
We'd have to have a denigrating quote about the Gay Jesuit. Gay Jesuit.
I mean, I think that's denigrating enough. Just the title.
I think if I wore that, they would think I'm a gay Jesuit. That's why I'm trying to get a disclaimer on it. Hey, I get a whole bunch of attaboys. And I'd be like, what do you mean, attaboy? That was presumptuous.
Let's move on.
Ecumenism. Yes. So I like this, where the ecumenism, where they're trying to interact with other churches and maybe reconcile with other Christian faiths. And when leading Protestant theologians began to speak of religionless Christianity and even the death of God, they went so far to the left. The Catholic Church couldn't possibly join back up with them, because they were even more left wing. Yeah. And then, the missions, and then there's cultural relativism, which is what we've already talked about ad nauseum. But, trying to say, well, maybe polygamy would be okay in Africa because there's a lot of polygamists there.
That'd be the way to get them into the Catholicism. Just break the rules of Catholicism so they can be the same and just say that they're Catholic.
Yeah. And then there's one group decided to find their task in terms of helping people be better Hindus. Well, I know I'm Catholic and I'm a Catholic missionary, but I'm just trying to make you a better Hindu. What? I want to make you a worse Hindu by making you Catholic.
Yes. It's ridiculous.
Weirdos. No, I'm getting very angry.
I can tell.
So let's keep going. Liberation theology, like the worst ever. Hey, Jesuits. Liberation theology. Yes. So that's really where the Marxist priests became very prominent, especially in Central America. They're like leading revolutions. And it's kind of funny because it's not like the Pope leading an army into battle during the Crusades, because it just isn't great, I'm not saying it's good. But at least that person knew he was Catholic, right? And he's fighting for some sort of Catholic power structure. These people didn't even believe in Catholicism, but there's this whole social justice war.
Because it's that movement that Christ was the savior of the oppressed, which I mean is true. Christ is there for them, but that's not like means that you should now go participate in Marxist riots in Latin America. That's not what that means at all.
Yes. And I like this where I don't know where this term came from. The Ostpolitik. I've never heard of that before.
Eastern policy, yeah.
Where they're basically you're trying to work within the system of communists and all that stuff.
I mean, it seemed like appeasement is what it said, because it's like the Vatican seemed to assume that communism wasn't going anywhere, so you have to work within it, and let them do whatever they want to do.
It's also called surrender.
Yes. And a group of Jesuits teaching in Rome even identified the Chinese communist dictator Mao Zedong as the hope of the world, the most authentic contemporary representative of the gospel.
Yeah,
that's insane.
That is why I detest the Jesuits.
Maybe that should be the degrading quote on the back. Mao Zedong is the savior of the world.
And having a quote of Jesuits. Like the Jesuits are saying that.
Yeah.
maybe not even have like we have like a little shield, like a coat of arms.
Yeah, like a Superman logo almost. But
it would just be GJ. But we wouldn't know what GJ means. GJ. Nobody else. Just Gay Jesuit. We won't say Gay Jesuit on the shirt.
But on the back, it'll still say Mao Zedong is the savior of the world.
Yes, we have to get the actual quote.
Yes, from the book or from the Jesuits, from the Gay Jesuits.
Yeah, when they declared. I'm sure we can find that document somewhere. Because there's so many stupid Marxists that thought the communists were doing God's work. Yeah. And they were just, as they call them, what do you call that?
Well, that's an argument that I still see. Is like, the early Christians lived like communists. They lived in communist communities because they shared everything.
Right.
What?
Yeah. So it's
sharing. That's what communism is, if you didn't know.
Right.
Yes.
It's never what it is. Yeah, it's state control of everything, and there's no place for religion. You freaks, you Jesuit freaks. So the Protestants ended up picking up a bunch of Hispanics because basically the Catholic Church, as the author points out, in the United States, there was almost an evacuation of the traditional faith after Vatican II. So it's like, and I'm thinking, if this communist pope goes too far to the left, I got to find another home at some point. Either that or it's a revolution. I'd probably choose revolution.
Yeah, I figured.
But I wonder what the Eastern Orthodox, are they still kind of traditional? I think some of them are. They vary from place to place, but they aren't far off from Catholicism.
Yeah, it's true.
And so there's the next section is the Democratic Church. This is just kind of dispiriting, going through this stuff. The call to action and the social justice stuff, and I like this quote about feminism. Feminists, many of them male, were usually the angriest. That's right.
That's a great quote. I saw that too, and I was reading that. It's fantastic.
And it's talking about women becoming more involved in the church. It's all well and good. After initial hesitation, the church authorities admitted women to the ranks of lectors. That's in the readers and the readings of the church, and ministers of communion, and acolytes or servers at mass, and all that kind of stuff. But the feminists demanded ordination, and it became increasingly strident, unpredictable. The feminists become strident.
More angry.
And then, of course, there's secularization in the West, after all this. And a lot of this just a general move. But I like how the author goes through, these different examples of these different Western countries that became so secular. Like he talks about the Netherlands. And they had a very, I think it was in the Netherlands, they had a large minority who were devout, but they ended up undertaking almost unlimited experimentation and tried to do different things to expand the reach of the church. And of course, the Catholic subculture quickly collapsed because it's not a subculture.
Yeah.
You're just part of the culture.
Yeah.
You have to be a strong subculture before you can conquer the culture.
Yeah.
And you have to retain
so otherwise
the
you're
core.
just weakening the subculture. If you're trying to make it like everything else, then it just doesn't exist. Like what you're saying. It just fades away.
Yes. Yeah. You become a melting pot that you've melted.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Spain. Spain's a complicated thing because there was so much murder from the communists when they took over after the election, and then there was the counter revolution, is really what Franco was in charge of. And he was authoritarian, of course, but he was so identified with the Catholic Church. After he died, there was was a popular reaction against the church because he was so tied into that, and of course the hedonism. You can see the theme in this hedonism, and you can see how the section on Ireland is outdated because he mentions that they were one of the very few Western nations that ended up permit abortion. Now they do, so they had a vote on that in the last few years.
Yeah,
and of course he blames it on sudden prosperity, leading to hedonistic reaction and opening up of that Pandora box of sin and whatever. And then Italy voted to legalize divorce, and in time the Italian birth rate dropped, becoming the lowest in Europe. I don't know. You can describe all that to Vatican II, but it surely didn't help. And then it mentions the tiny island republic of Malta, which was the most Catholic European country. Mass attendance fell from 82% in 1967 to barely half in 2010. I mean, that's really precipitous. That's a cultural change. Your entire culture has changed with that. Yeah. And then Poland, after they got out of communism, he mentions it appeared to be a mixed blessing as a hedonistic consumer society spread from the West, and then church attendance fallen to 60%. At least it's better than some of those other places.
Poland's an interesting country in recent years with Catholicism. Because I know they just elected a new prime minister who I think has decided that he's going to undo everything that the former one did. But it was like huge, like major, like Catholic, very traditionalist moves. Like I think that even like their Congress passed a law that says, we are a kingdom and our king is Jesus Christ, which is pretty awesome. This is very rare to happen anytime in the last 100 years.
Yes. Evidently, Jesus was not a very effective king because I think he it's just been overthrown. That's a leftist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. So, a troubled pope is the next section. It was Paul the Sixth, right?
Yes.
His 9-year episcopacy.
Episcopacy.
Yes. It says he was strongly anti-fascist and all that kind of stuff, but he really, it seemed like he just wasn't strong enough to deal with all this upending and this open-ended change. And I know it'd be hard to deal with it.
It's kind of thrust into really a horrible position because like the priest or the Pope who had just started this council just died, and now it's like, okay, deal with this, Paul. What are you going to do about all of this?
Yeah, but it certainly should have had a firmer hand on it, or at least take a more active role, I think. But I think the author kind of makes that point. And then, but I did like, like some of these written, what do you call them?
Encyclicals,
I guess, that the economic theory about redistributing wealth. Let's see. He says the Popularum Progressio, the progress of peoples, in 1967, seemed to accept the modern economic theory that poverty is best overcome not by redistributing wealth, but by the economic development of the entire society, which improves the lot of everyone. Yes, and I think that the church has been pretty consistent in that until recent years with our current communist pope. Yeah, that the way to improve the lot of the people is not just to have handouts from these people to those people, or just give handouts. You have to have economic reform and free market enterprise, not unregulated. Yes, but
because it's that spirit of corporatism is what we've talked about in the past.
Right. And I think what was it? I have it in here.
The smoke of Satan has entered the church. Is that what you're looking for? Yeah, his quote. In Indecision, he says, Paul sometimes anguished publicly over the many crises of the church, even lamenting that the smoke of Satan has entered the church. That's a quote. Right. But yeah, it's like exactly what you were saying, is he seemed indecisive. He didn't make a special effort to encourage Latin, did nothing to alter the direction of liturgical change, took no decisive action. So he's saying these things. He's like, well, somebody should do something about this. It's like, well, you're the Pope. You can. That's your job.
Yeah, it is your job. Well, yes. It's like I had a discussion with some local elected officials. They this comes up every once in a while in my towns. There's a tough issue, and they're bantering about. And somebody will always say, well, we should have a referendum. And so I have to remind them, well, you can't do a referendum. And I say, and the bottom line is, that's your job. Okay, it's your job to pass ordinances. You're elected to do that.
Yeah, well, it's like
do it.
Joe Biden has said stuff like that in the past. This is a tweet from some years ago, but I don't know. It's like the White House tweeted out like, "Gun violence is destroying this country. Blah blah blah. It's killing X amount of people. We need to do everything we can to blah 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 blah." And somebody replied to him like, "You are literally or Joe Biden is always tweeting stuff like, who is this president? I'd like to have a word with him." It's like, what are you talking about?
Politicians all the time. Somebody should do something. Well, what's wrong with you, knucklehead? So then, let's talk about Pope John Paul II. And he was, obviously the author loves Pope John Paul II. Yeah. But he was a historic pope. He was Polish, only Polish pope in history. Yeah. First non-Italian in 455 years. I mean, that's astounding. But I like this the description of him as progressively conservative. He was innovative in the service of orthodoxy. That's a great way to put it. And he was really strong against the death penalty and pushed that to the limits that he could at the time, and certainly very much against abortion, and really trying to firm up the Catholic teaching in the seminaries and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't realize he was the third longest serving pope.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
After St. Peter and St. Pius IX. And he was a world traveler. This is during my time. He was always on tour. Yeah. And it's said that he and Ronald Reagan were the reason why the Iron Curtain fell. The communist bloc. It was Ronald Reagan's militarism that bankrupted the communist state, and then just Pope John Paul constantly working against peaceably. Yeah. These communist jerks.
Yeah, which is very refreshing after we were just talking about, the former Pope and the Jesuits under him who were just kind of assuming, communism's here to stay. We have to work within the system. It's like, no, you can make change in the world.
Yeah. Well, he grew up in that system.
Yeah,
so
because he was in Poland.
He knew how evil it was, and he knew that it could be defeated, and he knew it needed to be defeated.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was important. And in his social teaching, I think what does he? How does he describe John Paul? It's like a great philosopher, I think is what he calls him, and then he says that Pope Benedict was a great theologian. We'll get to him in a minute. But like he had these encyclicals that these writings that he would issue, and about the family. The family is the indispensable basis of the social order. I mean, just really reaffirming that. I mean, it's always been the Catholic thought, but he really pushed these things hard, and he really was consistent with them. He didn't send mixed messages, which was really important. And then the only thing I'd talk about a little bit is this imploring countries to be generous in receiving immigrants, but that was in a different world than we have now. These open borders in Europe and in America, I don't know what he would have thought.
And he does say, well, immediately following that, he raised moral questions about globalization. Right. Again, what he's sort of describing as the international free market in which poor nations continued to fall behind richer ones.
Right.
But I think also in that idea of, just kind of the moral consequences that come along with that, where you're sort of just,
well, and really what you're doing is you're not solving the problem. The people that are left behind are still have these terrible countries they're living in.
Yeah.
The Catholic Church, which is a church of everywhere and everyone, should be working on improving the lot of everybody and not just say, well, you escape that and come over here.
Yeah.
Let's get it right over there too. And there was a big push, and I think the Pope was one of them, for canceling debts of third world countries.
Yeah, that's what he says.
Which was a huge thing at the time. Like Bono eventually was really big into it. Oh yeah, he was, and they got, and Bono doesn't believe in that anymore, to his credit, because they got a whole bunch of debt canceled. But all that meant was they just created more debt, and a lot of times they canceled the debt so they could buy more military equipment. And so they were so idealistic, they should have been more cynical about it. Just canceling debt doesn't solve any problems unless you have a plan for investment and your economy. But if you're a third world dictator and they cancel your debt, what do? You run up a credit card just to get more weapons. Really.
So you're telling me that there's a problem with Biden saying he wants to cancel every student loan ever?
That's a whole different problem.
That's true.
And that doesn't solve the problem anyway, because the tuition still goes up and the debt still goes up. So you're just rewarding a specific group of people. Then what?
Exactly.
And my biggest problem with that whole debt forgiveness is the room and board portion of it. Why should all these working class people that didn't go to college have to pay for your living in a fucking resort, to put it bluntly, because that's what these colleges are nowadays. And I think if most people don't know how nice college campuses are now. I was astounded when I was going on college tours with your older brother and then with you, how nice these places are. Because when we went to school back in the day, but like I'd go visit my buddies in college, the dorm rooms were so much smaller than what you guys have. A lot of them didn't have air conditioning, and nobody cared. Yeah. So I guess you do sweat. You have to take a shower, take a cold shower or something. But to have everybody else pay for all that partying, you didn't have a job, you didn't pay any of it, you just racked up debt to be an art major. And
I know Truman's a relatively simple campus as far as like state schools go, but even then, we have a full free rec center to all students. We have a pool, we have track, we have all of these facilities and stuff.
We literally had a basketball court. That's it.
Yeah.
If there was a weight room, but that was for the athletics people, the people that are on the teams.
Yeah. I think the bigger problem is showing how much college campuses spend on contraception every year, because we just pay for hundreds upon hundreds of condoms and stuff just to hand out to students. It's like, why? Yeah, it's weird. Why do we do that?
Weird.
Well, for sexual health. What?
Yes.
What are you talking about?
Yes.
It's very strange.
Yes. Anyway, so we both kind of went off the deep end of that one. So, the free market, I already talked about that. The theology of the body. Do you want to talk about the theology of the body?
I think the portion where he's talking about the culture of death, I think is good. I think that's one of the best things to come out of him. I think that's very accurate. The culture of death epitomized by abortion, euthanasia, and other direct assaults on human life. That's in opposition to his, theology of the body. And I think he's very accurate in characterizing, the current generation as a culture of death, in which, death is almost seen as a good thing. There's
Yes.
people, I don't know if you've seen some of these videos of like, abortion, debates and stuff where it's like, well, aren't you glad that you were born? So many people are like, well, no, I didn't ask to be born. It's just horrible. People don't recognize, how important life is anymore.
I think there's
some people, at least.
I think that somebody should put a gun to their head. So, really? I mean, or hand them a gun.
Yeah.
You really. I mean, if you really believe that, why are you here?
Yeah.
Why are you wasting my time?
Well, I think that the problem with that is too many of them would do it.
I don't know. Would they?
I think some of them
They
would.
would not. No, what they wouldn't.
Some of them.
They might shoot me.
Well, that's another problem.
They might murder me.
Yeah.
They are going to kill themselves. They don't really think that. None of them think that.
Mm-hmm. Bastards. I did also like his new feminism as well. If you want to talk about that.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
You want to take over? Go ahead.
Oh, well,
No, you got to move me along. Because otherwise
yeah,
it'll be
but he's
3
saying,
hours.
in response to the demands for ordination of women and the feminist claim that motherhood restricts women's freedom, he expounded the new feminism, which women's highest dignity lies precisely in her free response to the divine invitation to participate in creation. I think that's very true. The distinction that, women do have that great purpose.
Yeah, and that's really been denigrated.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
By everybody for the last 30 or 40 years, and I think we're really seeing the fruits of that effort.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because even women don't think that's such a big deal. It's like, oh, it's a burden. Really? Are you kidding me? You
It's a
can create
parasite.
thing.
Too many people say that it's a parasite. It's disgusting.
My Lord. No, maybe someday they'll wake up. I don't know. It's weird. It really is a strange kind of death cult.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's exactly what it is.
Ramesh Ponnuru, who was a conservative
Just
author.
casted a spell on me.
He is of some sort of descent. I don't know what his ethnicity is. That's why he's not named Joe Smith. But he's a lawyer, and he was a columnist for the National Review, and I have not read them in a long time, and I've not read anything from him in a long time. But I think it was him that had, I think it was a book called The Culture of Death, The Party of Death, which talked about the Democratic Party and how they want euthanasia, they want abortion.
Yep.
This was before it was cool to call them death cultists. So there's ecumenism. I don't know if I need to talk about that. So let's move on to, it talks about the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, the CDF, which was under Ratzinger, who later became Pope. And that dude, the more I read about him, the more I think, man, this guy's right on, but I don't know why he resigned.
Yeah, Benedict,
going on there. Pope Benedict, yeah. But this time he's underneath John Paul. He was one of the aggiornamento people, but he split with them because they got too crazy. Really, it seems like they went to the left, and you could see it wasn't going anywhere. And so he had to deal with these priests and Catholic groups trying to talk about just general spirituality, and there was a New Age movement that was a big deal, like in the 70s, early 80s. Oh, I'm a New Age person. They had crystals and stuff.
I mean, we still have a lot of that today.
You don't know how big it was. Yeah. It was a big deal, and but I like how the author says the New Age movement, which attracted many feminists, including religious sisters, being even more inimical to the genuine religion that then was rational skepticism, because it set itself up as the true religion that transcends all others, exploiting the natural human religious sense in order to undermine Christianity.
It's that variety of pantheism. Everybody's right because it's all just Gaia or whatever. That's what we were saying earlier.
So then, the collapse of communism was huge. Of course, the Church of Poland had a lot to do with that, and the Solidarity movement. I don't know that we need to go into too much detail, but that was very much associated with the Catholic Church and Pope John Paul. And so then let's go to So I do like this, like in Marxism. Marxism had shown itself to be an instrument of tyranny rather than liberation. And I think
he's talking about John Paul's experience, in Poland, of course.
Yeah, and so he had a confrontation with the Sandinistas partly because he had those experiences in Poland. So he was more clear-eyed because he lived through it. And so Ratzinger was in charge of the dogma, and it said he did more than any other single person to clarify and deepen the meaning of the council and bringing the theology ressourcement
and that was
to fruition in ways that were rooted in the New Testament and early church fathers, but also spoke to modernity.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and just for clarification, for if you missed last episode, the ressourcement, that's the idea that we should be looking backwards to the early church fathers rather than trying to update everything in aggiornamento. So the two sort of competing schools there.
Yes.
The ressourcement.
So Ratzinger, under the CDF, issued official warnings against several theologians. Although some of them complained that they were condemned without being understood, they were in fact being judged by a man whose intelligence and theological attainments were superior to their own. Bam.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, dummy, I know what you're talking about. You're just wrong. No, you just don't understand.
Yeah.
No, I understood. And they also specifically say there's no spirit of Vatican II. It's just, in the sense the meaning was dependent on changing human culture. It's just the words were the words. And that was a huge strengthening. I'll get to strengthening the foundation of the faith. Give me a second. I've been talking for like an hour and a half.
Well, hour 10. We only have a little bit left.
What else are we going to talk about? The liturgy. I think, let's see, these changes, talking about this mystical community and all that kind of stuff, which made the liturgy seem merely a human project rather than divinely ordained. And so this effort by Ratzinger and his group to try to reaffirm people that there is a belief system. It's not just because people now agree with it. It's either you can agree with it or not, but it doesn't change. There's some Episcopal conferences, and then what else we want to talk about.
Says that liberation theology was criticized by the CDF under Ratzinger. You also have the Catechism coming about, really in an official form, was big then. He says the major instrument for clarifying doctrinal confusion is the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which was promulgated by John Paul II and was developed under Ratzinger's overall supervision. And so it's the first universal catechism since the Council of Trent.
Oh, yeah,
so that's
right.
Finally we have something on the books. This is what it says. This is the teachings.
He also in 1990 was trying to get Catholic universities to recover their religious identity. It says, but in the United States, where most such universities were located, only a few institutions responded to that call. Boy, that's the truth.
Yeah.
That's the God's honest truth. So religious life during this time and up to, I think this book was published in 2012?
2012, I believe.
Yeah, I like this. The Jesuits. When John Paul asked the Society of Jesus to combat atheism, the leadership replied that this could be done best by promoting social change, not by confronting atheism on an intellectual level. What absolute turds.
Yeah.
That's your whole job. Anyway.
Well, no, they serve the poor. That's their job now.
That's not their job.
That's what they say their job is.
Yay, Jesuit. Yeah, so he tried to do some reform of their leadership and little change. So he kind of failed on that one. And there's some new communities, missionaries of charity. Mother Angelica. I don't know. Have you ever heard about Mother Angelica? She was a big deal. I think in the late 80s. My dad used to watch her show.
Really?
Mother Angelica Live.
Oh.
Full nun habit. She was a cloistered nun, but she had a television studio.
Interesting.
They had a network, EWTN.
Yeah.
And it was when cable was really hitting it big. So it was like a free channel all across the United States. And they had nothing but Catholic programs.
That's great. Yeah.
And Mother Angelica, she was a funny lady.
Yeah.
Very entertaining. And I would watch it. And she did a lot of praying.
Yeah.
That was kind of boring. Turn on TV at 8 o'clock Tuesday night. And you see this lady in a habit.
Yeah. Well, I think that's like a good example of how you do make it, appealing to a modern audience. Is the Mother Angelica stuff. Have that television channel. We don't need to go about, we need to change all of our social institutions and blah, 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 blah. It's one good thing that came out of Vatican II.
And the channel was consistently Catholic, too.
Yes.
It was her in a nun's habit. And she was, reassuring people that, hey, Catholicism is right. And no, I'm not changing my mind.
Yeah.
You just have to be wrong if you disagree with me. So that was a big deal. So there's the Legionaries of Christ, which was a group as well, founded in Mexico in 1940. and then had phenomenal growth, I guess, in the 1980s. So the laity got more involved, of course. And, there were the Opus Dei group. I don't really want to talk about that, but we'll talk about the charismatic movement.
Yeah,
that was a big deal. I remember, I guess it was in my teens. What era would this be? Do we have in the? But it was really, really a strong movement, and it was really confusing to a lot of Catholics, because this would be like, like if you think today, and we're not going to name names, but like the people in church that you think are the most traditional Catholic type people, like they might wear the women might wear those things on their heads. What are those things called?
Oh, man. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
They have like 30 kids.
Yeah.
And they're like, those are the Catholics. All of a sudden, they became like these charismatics. And they're speaking in tongues and stuff. Yeah. And so they have to have like special prayer services or even some masses for them, because
interesting.
The speaking in tongues freaks people out, right? And my whole theory, I have told you my theory on speaking in tongues. It doesn't make any sense to me that God would have people speaking in tongues unless the person listening to you could understand it.
Yeah, that's what I've believed too. Because I mean, that's what happened in Acts, is that they spoke and everybody heard it in their own language.
In their own language.
That's the big problem that I see with, like, especially the Pentecostals.
Yeah, you're just talking gibberish.
Yeah, because I have a friend who like grew up in a Pentecostal church, and it's like, it's a weird sort of pressure, because it's like you're supposed to, they believe that if you really are, with God and stuff like that, then you'll have these like physical gifts that you'll see. And so there's like a lot of pressure, like, if you're not speaking in tongues, if you're not, being a prophet or what have you, then clearly you're not praying right. You're not, holy enough in some fashion. So I think a lot of it is just that social pressure from everyone around you to kind of babble. I don't think that's how it actually works.
No,
and that's not what the Catholic Church believes. Yeah.
I don't know why God would make it hard to understand people.
Yes. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Well, they believe it's the language of the Holy Spirit. That's the term that I've always heard. Of course, it's incomprehensible to humans.
That's the Holy Spirit?
Sounds like him to me.
All right. I don't really want to... I mean, I've never met a Pentecostal person that's not a good person.
Yeah, no, I've
They're fantastic people. I really don't want to insult their religion. I just don't... I can't. Anyway, the charismatic movement was kind of a lot of that. Yeah, because they're really devout people, and they were trying to get closer in union with Jesus. All that stuff's good, and it really kind of like flamed out. But a little Pentecostal joke.
Yeah, there you go.
But that was a real deal. It was very very strong movement within the Catholic Church. But but the bishops didn't really like it. A lot of people didn't like it. Some people really loved it. I remember my parents were very good friends, and it mentions that there was like maybe a headquarters or some event in Michigan, because my parents had very good friends that were in Michigan, and they were charismatics.
Yeah, Ann Arbor, Michigan, the Word of God community. Yeah,
yeah. So they were involved, I think, in that group. But anyway, communities. Yeah, okay. So decline is the next section.
That's just talking about the decline of the charismatics. I really liked what he says here at the bottom of the page. The conservative laity, he says, one of the great ironies of post-conciliar Catholicism is the fact that despite the emancipation of the laity, priests and religious were always the backbone of liberal movements, whereas conservative lay people not only often lacked clerical support, they might even find themselves in direct opposition to their priests and bishops. Right. That's exactly what we were talking about, when the whole council started, is that especially in the U.S., like the communities were great, and you have these weirdo sort of theologians, especially over in Europe, where they don't have their parish communities, they don't have their conservative communities anymore, and they're just spouting whatever weird theologies they have.
And so then these conservative lay people are organizing books and publishing books and journals and founding schools, almost without any assistance, formal assistance of the church. So that's going to, is great, and then of course, homeschooling became a bigger thing, because the educational opportunities for actually teaching Catholicism, sometimes you can't even get in a Catholic school. Yeah. But he also mentions, just in passing almost, the pro-life movement, which was huge, I think, for the Catholic Church, and certainly for society. But that was the huge marches and then interacting with the Baptists and the other. You find out, hey, we agree more with the Baptists than we do these liberal feminist weirdos. And I think the Baptists were thinking the same thing. Hey, these Catholics are all right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, first we conquer them, and then we can fight among ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Common stronger enemy.
Exactly.
We got to get rid of those people, and then we can kill all those Catholics. No, I'm just joking. Convert all the Catholics, you'd say. So then there's a section on Benedict, which is
16th.
under the new millennium. Benedict 16th. I was just calling Benedict because I don't know the other words. He's just known as Benedict to me.
Yeah.
And he was his quick election, as the author says, was therefore an unambiguous decision by the cardinals to continue the path of renewal laid out by John Paul II, because he was really...
Because he says it was a surprise. Yeah, because he was elected in 2005. He says it was a surprise to many because as the guardian of orthodoxy, he was often the target of liberal attack as a divisive figure. Yeah. So especially with, Vatican II, so in recent memory, where you're trying to be less divisive and more appealing, it's like, oh, you elected this guy?
Yes.
Which I think is a good thing that the church did in electing him.
And this book was written before he resigned, so there's nothing about that, which I wonder what the author would think of that. But he does mention the sexual abuse scandal, which was huge in the United States, I think maybe even more per capita in Ireland. But it's like almost a universal problem within the hierarchy of the church for whatever reason. I don't know that I need to go on those rants.
Yeah,
but
we've
it
talked
was
about those before.
Undercutting the people's faith in the church and people's faith in God,
which is
terrible. What else do we want to talk about? Papal theology and social teaching. He describes Ratzinger, being Benedict, as the greatest theologian to ever serve as Pope, following the greatest philosopher ever to do so.
Interesting.
That's what we thought about. Pope John Paul is a great philosopher, but
I like what also he says. He said Benedict hoped to have his greatest effect really in liturgy, and he wanted to have a reform of the reform. Because the reform movement's gone so kind of weird and wild, and he said wanted to recover the sense of liturgy as a divine action in which men are privileged to participate. So it's not just like this group, discussion anymore. It's not just this group gathering, a social meeting. It's really this divine, really holy thing, in which it's a privilege to attend, which I think that spirit has disappeared among a lot of people.
And then he wanted the greater use of Latin, and he gave blanket permission for all priests to celebrate the Tridentine.
Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, that was revoked by his successor.
But he also says it was a permission for all priests, but it was a permission that seemed to be utilized disproportionately by younger priests. Yeah. So it's like the old people didn't want to go back to it, but the younger priests did.
Yep. And did I say it during the last podcast?
I think so, yeah.
About how they're trying to say that young priests can't do it.
You're
just coming out of the seminary.
Yeah,
which
it's just ridiculous.
But you know why they're doing it. Because they want to undercut the conservative Catholic side of the equation. So, Anglican conversions. I think we mentioned before in other podcasts about how married Anglican priests have converted, and Benedict allowed entire groups of them to kind of come over and join the church as Catholic priests. Because they had broken with the Anglican communion, primarily because of women clergy and the acceptance of homosexuality, and so the teaching of the Anglicans, as I understand it, originally was very similar to Catholicism.
Oh yeah. They're one of the closest to us.
I mean, until the king, Henry the VIII.
Out of the Protestants, I mean, again, up until recently, they were the closest to Catholic theology still.
Let's see. It says both liberal Catholics and some Anglicans denounced the conversions as a violation of ecumenism. You know what I say to that? I have it in the F you. There's a section on the Jews. That's just a paragraph.
Yeah.
He was Ratzinger was in the Nazi youth. Everybody was, I think.
Yeah, because he was German. Yeah, because he had to be.
And so some people defended him. Some people criticized him for that. You are a product of your era. And
it was also that's when you begin the big campaign against Pius XII, when everybody started seeing him as the quote unquote Nazi Pope.
Right.
It's like, well, no, that's not the case. We talked about that in past episodes.
Yeah, certainly he could have done a better job. But he was in a tough spot. The resurgent Islam, which is still ongoing. And Christians are subjected to frequent mob violence, like in Pakistan and other Muslim states, terrorism and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well,
but the massive Muslim immigration to Europe is a big problem. But I think a lot of it is just if no one has any faith then a minority who has strong faith is going to conquer you. That's just what's happening.
Because I like what he says, because this is, again, over 10 years ago, he's saying, Islam's greatest challenge was the massive Muslim immigration, where combined with a very low birth rate, it seemed likely in time to become the majority religion, what was once called Christendom.
Right.
That's a big thing. I just saw the other day that the biggest religion in France's capital city, Paris, is Islam. That is the largest religion there, which is insane. That was once upon a time one of the seats of Catholicism, really.
Yep, and the most common baby name in Dublin,
Mohammed.
Yeah. There's a man on the street interview, person where he's asking people who are obviously of Irish descent, hey, I was asking people some questions. What's the most common baby name? And they're like, is it Patrick? No. Is it something else? Connor? No.
Sean?
What is it? Do you really want to know? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Muhammad. They're like, oh, okay. They're like, they don't want to say F.
Yeah.
Because that's not polite. But it changes. Having a majority Muslim country is different than a majority Hindu country, and a majority Jewish country. It's just your culture is going to change.
Yes, exactly.
Especially if it happens rapidly,
as it is now. Yeah.
And but to recognize that is racist.
Yes, of course.
But did you know that by 2010 there were well over 1 billion Catholics?
Wow, there you go.
Of which 350 go to church every Sunday. Slight exaggeration.
Yeah.
So there's talking about the next section of the book is worldwide church. The growth and decline. It was growing gangbusters before Vatican II, and still today there's a lot of growth, but not in America, not in the West.
Yeah.
Perhaps in Latin America, but basically mainly in Asia and Africa. That's where it's growing the fastest. And it gave some statistics which I thought were really cool. Catholics were only 17% of the population in Africa, but their number had multiplied 15 times since Vatican II. And while they were only 3% of the population in Asia, their number there had tripled during the same time. And that's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you're talking about smaller percentages, but that kind of growth. And the same thing with India. He says, in spite of the popular image of Hinduism as a virtually pacifist religion, Christians were subjected to violence, including murder, etc. But as they said, their flock, that the blood of the martyrs was the seed of Christians. So Hindus that's an interesting country.
Yeah, it is.
And then the next, I guess, is final section, isn't it? The crisis of civilization. The de-Christianization of the United States and of Europe is a big problem, and the religious freedom is under attack, and that's nothing. I mean, this book is prescient in this because it mentions how in France and Canada, Protestant clergy were convicted of the crime of speaking against homosexuality from the pulpit. That's gotten on steroids in Canada
absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah.
And that of course the Catholics in some states, I think California for sure, they no longer participate as adoption agencies because they're required to allow children to be adopted to homosexual couples.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's discriminatory. So there's a fight on about the religious freedom
I found
today.
that there's debates about, or maybe this is something that the Biden admin has said that they want to do, about not letting kids be adopted into families who do not view homosexuality favorably. Right. Like if you believe that homosexuality is like a sin, then you will be ineligible to adopt a child.
Yes,
which is crazy.
So when I was your age, the argument was, the homosexuals just want to be left alone. What's the privacy of my own home? Why are you so concerned with my sexuality? It's none of your business, so you can't fire me if you find out I'm gay. And everybody's like, oh, that's fair. It's none of our business. And so there's anti-discrimination laws they're changed, and then the gay marriage thing was, well, love is love, and I am committed in a relationship, and hell, half of you heterosexuals get divorced anyway, so why can't we get married? And people are like, okay, it's not the same, but well, you can't say it's not the same, but okay. And now it's come to the end point, which is like, you're going to be gay. Like, no, you're all gay. We're all gay, and we're all going to be pansexual. You're going to be pansexual, and if you don't, we're going to make you be gay.
Yeah.
And here it comes. We're going to have gay sex in Congress.
Oh, yeah. That's ridiculous.
Well,
I think I've been in that room, too.
Oh, have you?
Well, that's great.
Yeah, so it's anyway. So it's the natural thing. I'm really surprised we haven't gotten to legalization of bigamy. I was really expecting that to be the next thing, and I was expecting the one following that to be incest. But they're consenting adults if you're sterilized. But they haven't moved that way. They went to the transgender thing, which I really didn't anticipate because it's so insane. Yeah. Illogical. The other ones had a logical path.
Well,
to normalizing them.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's that follows more in the path of less in the path of homosexual, marriage, and more in the path of everything as a social construct. So that came from almost a different direction that sort of just became combined with the LGBT stuff.
You're right. But and I'm not equating homosexual relationships with incest.
Yes.
Or bigamy. They're different, but the same logic applies. Love is love. What does it matter? Why is anybody regulating what I do sexually? And I think the end, my thought was first to be bigamy, because why can't you have multiple spouses? There's no logic that would say you can allow gay marriage, but you can't allow gay marriage with three dudes or three chicks or a combination.
Well, I know California's discussed it at least.
Well, for sure. It's been discussed for years. So I thought that would be the next push. And then I thought, well, there's no logical reason not to allow incest if they're sterilized. Because what's the harm? It's two consenting adults. So that's the next logical one. Well, there's more of an ick factor. Yeah. But people get over the ick factor. There used to be a huge thing about gay people being icky. Yeah. They're not icky anymore. And I thought the final end all, I really didn't anticipate the transgender thing. The final end all, I was expecting bestiality.
Yeah.
Because animals can consent.
Oh, yeah.
But I thought that was going to be the final step in the path to degeneracy.
Evidently not.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll get there. Yeah, that's true.
The
path isn't ended.
And this is end cul-de-sac of the transgender thing, which is the funniest, most fascinating part of it is how it undercuts feminism. Yeah. It's just great. I just think it's just so funny. Yes. Because for years they kept beating into us that women can do everything that men can do, and there are certain exceptional women they're very strong and powerful and fast and all that stuff. But on average, they can't run as fast, and they're not as strong. And these transgender dudes are just kicking their asses. Yeah. I mean, they're murdering these people. Maybe they're losing teeth. They get concussions and brain bleeds and stuff. Anyway, so what do we even want to talk about? At the end, Benedict urged the protection of the environment. There's an environment discussion. That's basically on stewardship. The original conservation movement was stewardship. And that's a Catholic ideal as well. And then Christian humanism, which is really dealing with these issues about surgically induced sex changes, which is mentioned in the book. So he's ahead of his time on that. Yeah, because he says insemination and cloning and the creation of life in laboratories only to be destroyed. And those are metaphysical, even more than moral, in the sense of, okay, what are we even talking? What are these things?
And he's spot on there. Because what he says the frontiers of morality stood at a point that had been mere science fiction at the time of Vatican II. We've just been kind of thrust into all of these, crazy new issues. Yes. And it's like, what do we do with all of this? Yes. And it's like,
condemn it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I do like I don't know if you read his conclusion a little bit, but I do like what he says at the end. I'm just going to read the last paragraph because it reminded me a lot of Tolkien stuff. He says, thus for Christians, there can be no final understanding of history in this life. No one knows when history will reach its end, and the believer is enjoined by Christ to refrain from all such speculation. If mankind survives another 1,000,000 years, its view of history will change profoundly, as all the carefully delineated eras that are now part of the historical record will recede into a very remote past, to be disposed of by future historians in the twinkling of an eye, which I thought was a good way to end this history of the Catholic Church, and of course relates to Tolkien's view of God as the author, and we don't really know our end, and there can still be good that can come from a lot of bad, because we don't know how things will end up for 100% certainty. Yes. But yeah, that was
Do you have any final thoughts about how many minutes are we into this?
We are at an hour and a half. That's all right. It was a good chapter.
What are your final thoughts about maybe the chapter or the book? What'd you get out of it as far as the podcast?
It gave me
huge value.
Yes, much more information on how the Catholic Church developed. Made me realize how both how little has changed and how much has changed over 2,000 years. Because it's like some of the stuff, especially in the early church, it's like, oh well, we just do that. Yeah. That's still something that we do today. Yeah. It kind of is interesting in that regard, and how similar, especially the theology is and everything like that. But then also how much we have changed just in. Overall, I kind of see it as moral decline in some ways. Now, there's been very rough points in church history in the past as well, which has done a good point, a good job of pointing out. But at the same time, this just sort of, the conciliar spirit, I think is I think he's right. I think he's described as one of the biggest crises to ever face the church. And of course, we won't know what happens next, but I think he's right on that. This is a very bad time for the Catholic Church right now.
True.
What do you think?
Pretty much a lot the same. Yeah. I was reassured by the consistency of the liturgy. Yeah. Over hundreds and hundreds of years, or thousands of years, how much is the same. And also the fact that it survived through really horrible people, horrible leadership, murderers, and people like no joke, Pope at the front of an army. You wouldn't even think about that. And so it kind of gave me a lot of hope about our present Pope. Yeah. And that, all of us will die. and be replaced by maybe something better. Yeah. Maybe something worse. But it kind of reassured me to not jump ship. Yeah. Because and also every time people were like really critical of the church and chose to leave the church instead of fight through it or try to persist, they always ended up going off the deep end and getting wacko or something. And all sorts of crazed ideas of what morality was, and really the pride issue came in. Yeah. Like, I know better than everybody, and so I'm going to come up with my own new religion. And that never didn't end up well for any of them.
And I think that's a good thing to remember, especially as soon as we see a lot of issues in the current church. That doesn't mean that we should necessarily leave. Correct. Because then that can cause a whole bunch of other problems. And if anything, you need people to fight for what's right within the church instead of just jumping ship.
Well, you see how the Anglican church has become just a self-parody. Yeah. With these left-wing bishops and knuckleheads that are running that thing into the ground.
Yeah, exactly.
Because nobody's going to go to church and nobody's going to believe anything. And you can't get a membership going when you don't believe in anything that's fixed. Yeah. So it was a great book. Yeah.
Some parts I think got into details. I think a little too much. I think next season I want to find something that's more big picture focused. Yes. We could just discuss more on a broader topic. Yeah. But no, I enjoyed it. It was details. I think it was very very well written. He had a great writing style and included very very good information. Give a balanced account, I think, of everything. Which was,
you should contact him and see if he'll be a guest on our podcast.
I could. I mean, he goes to. That's why we picked the book, is because he's a professor at St. Louis University. Yeah. I don't know if he still teaches there, but.
Although after he hears my rants about
the Gay Jesuits.
The Gay Jesuits.
Well, I don't know. He got some digs in at the Jesuits, I think, and at feminists. That's true.
I should be more polite.
That's
the Gay Jesuits.
That's all right. Do you have any other final thoughts?
No.
All right. Well, this has been Season 6, Episode 22 of Unlimited Opinions, the final episode of Season 6. Again, we'll still accept book suggestions. So if you're listening to this a couple days or so after it's come out, tweet at us at ULMTD Opinions for any books that you think would be good for us to read for next season. But I've been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
All right. It was a good season, I think.
Sorry, it went long.
Yeah, that's all right.